In the gray pre-dawn hours when St. Petersburg's canals usually lie silent under low cloud and mist, the city awakens instead to a sustained, disorienting roar that residents at first mistake for thunder rolling in from the Gulf of Finland, but which soon reveals itself as something far more deliberate and terrifying, a layered convergence of engine whine, sonic cracks, emergency sirens, and the concussive punctuation of air defense fire echoing across districts built for czars and tourists rather than war. As reports cascade through fragmented Russian state media and encrypted civilian channels that as many as 300 Ukrainian drones, some small and fast, others long-range and heavy with explosives, still others acting as decoys or electronic warfare platforms, have penetrated deep into Russian airspace in one of the most ambitious coordinated aerial operations of the modern conflict, striking fuel depots, military logistics hubs, radar installations, power substations, communication nodes, and symbolic sites in and around Russia's second-largest city, transforming St. Petersburg from a cultural jewel into the epicenter of a national security crisis that exposes not only vulnerabilities in Russia's layered defenses, but fractures within its political and military command structure. As flames rise near the outskirts of the city, smoke columns drift toward historic facades, and cell phone footage spreads faster than official statements can contain, fueling panic, disbelief, and a rapidly growing sense that the war, long framed as distant and manageable, has arrived unmistakably at the heart of the Russian state, prompting whispered questions in elite circles and crowded kitchens alike about whether Vladimir Putin, a leader whose political mythology is inseparable from St. Petersburg itself, has lost control of the narrative, the battlefield, and perhaps even the immediate future, as emergency measures are announced and contradicted almost simultaneously. Flights are grounded, bridges closed, and metro stations sealed, while competing power centers, from the defense ministry to regional authorities to the security services, issue overlapping directives that reveal confusion rather than cohesion, and analysts abroad note that the scale and coordination of the drone barrage suggest months of preparation, deep intelligence penetration, and a strategic shift by Ukraine toward demonstrating not just resilience but reach, signaling to both Russian citizens and international observers that the Kremlin's promises of security are increasingly hollow, that sanctions, battlefield losses, and internal purges have degraded Russia's ability to anticipate and neutralize asymmetric threats, and that the psychological impact of sustained drone warfare, cheap, persistent, and omnipresent, is now eroding the sense of invulnerability that autocratic systems rely upon to maintain obedience, as social media fills with images of air defense missiles streaking upward over residential neighborhoods, debris raining onto streets, and residents sheltering in basements not unlike those seen for years in Ukrainian cities, creating an uncomfortable mirror that state propagandists struggle to distort, even as they attempt to recast the events as proof of NATO aggression or Western-backed terrorism, a narrative that feels increasingly strained when juxtaposed against the visible chaos and the mounting evidence that some drones reached their targets with alarming precision, hitting facilities previously thought to be beyond Ukraine's operational range, thereby forcing Russian military planners into a reactive posture that prioritizes damage control over strategic initiative, while behind closed doors, according to unnamed sources cited by foreign intelligence leaks and investigative journalists, emergency meetings convene among senior officials who are acutely aware that St. Petersburg is not just another city, but a cornerstone of Putin's personal and political identity, the place where his story as a post-Soviet strongman began, and thus an attack on its stability carries symbolic weight far beyond its immediate military effect, raising the stakes of every decision made in the following hours, as the Kremlin faces a narrowing set of options that all carry significant risk, whether escalating retaliation in a way that could provoke broader international involvement, tightening domestic repression to suppress visible dissent sparked by fear and anger, or attempting to downplay the incident at the cost of credibility. all while the economic implications ripple outward as insurance markets react, energy infrastructure disruptions threaten supply chains, and foreign investors already wary of Russian exposure reassess the calculus of remaining engaged, compounding pressures on an economy strained by prolonged war spending and sanctions. And as the day unfolds, the narrative fractures further when independent analysts begin mapping strike locations and concluding that the drone wave was designed not merely to cause physical damage, but to overload command and control systems, exhaust interceptor stocks, and create a sustained sense of siege that undermines public confidence in the state's capacity to protect its own core territories, a tactic refined through years of observing Russian operations in Ukraine and adapted with grim irony. While inside the Kremlin, the political consequences loom even larger, as elite factions that have long competed for influence may see in the chaos an opportunity to shift blame, consolidate power, or distance themselves from decisions that led to strategic overreach, feeding speculation that Putin's grip, though still formidable, is no longer unassailable, particularly as rumors circulate, unverified yet potent, that security protocols around the president have been tightened to unprecedented levels, that travel plans are canceled or altered at the last minute, and that communication with certain regional commanders has been temporarily severed, fueling sensational headlines abroad that frame the moment as a potential inflection point or even an existential threat to Russia's current leadership. Headlines that, while often exaggerated, capture a real and unsettling truth that the war has entered a phase where symbolic victories and psychological shocks may matter as much as territorial gains, and where the image of inevitability cultivated by authoritarian power is being punctured by the buzzing persistence of machines that cost a fraction of the missiles fired to stop them. As night falls again over St. Petersburg and fires are brought under control but not fully extinguished, the city remains under heightened alert, streets eerily quiet except for patrols and the occasional echo of distant explosions, and the population is left suspended between official assurances that the situation is stabilized and the visceral memory of a day when the sky itself seemed hostile. A dissonance that seeps into conversations, erodes trust, and plants the kind of doubt that no amount of televised bravado can easily erase, leading observers to conclude that regardless of immediate military outcomes, the drone strikes mark a profound shift in the conflict's trajectory, demonstrating that geography and prestige no longer guarantee safety, that technological adaptation favors those willing to innovate under pressure, and that for Vladimir Putin, the war he sought to control and contain may now be dictating terms to him, turning his hometown into a symbol not of strength and resurgence, but of vulnerability and improbability, a reminder that in modern warfare, power is measured not only by armies and arsenals, but by resilience, legitimacy, and the fragile perception of control, all of which have been shaken by a single, relentless day when hundreds of drones rewrote the strategic and psychological landscape of Russia's war.